and welcome to Change the Music to Change the Experience, a video series where we talk to experts from different industries that use music in specific ways to impact a user or a customer experience.
This week, we're speaking with Danny Dove, who's a London-based DJ and music producer with a host of successful hits and remixes, amassing millions of views on YouTube and DJing in some of the most sought-after locations.
Indeed. So, Danny, for anyone that doesn't know you already, I thought we could maybe just if you wanted to give a quick sort of truncated version of you, because you've done so many different interesting things, maybe a kind of the things you've done to date and the areas of interest that you have as well.
Yeah, so I guess I started in the late 90s, had a passion for electronic music and the sort of generation, the evolution of the rave scene, got into DJing. Seemed like good fun. And from there, ended up working with clubs like the Ministry of Sound, very iconic venues, and working with some of their sub-brands, DJing, traveling around the world, sort of Middle East, Asia, parts of South America and Europe, of course. And from there, kind of, it was just a natural evolution into wanting to understand the music more. So, I'd always played the guitar, so I got into the technological side of it and got into making music. From there, I think I moved into really wanting to understand the psychologies of music and found myself working with companies that were, with the sort of digital evolution of music and MP3s, there was opportunities to utilize catalogs of music in a way that hadn't been possible before. So we started getting into that, particularly with like what you guys do and distributing into venues. And I was fascinated by that. And so I got into the psychology of it. I worked in the background, but wasn't really interested in what I'd call, selling of the units and putting in tech. So I shifted into what we now refer to as audio branding, but back then didn't have a face. And again, like I loved the idea of really drilling into companies' brands and understanding how to impact their movement. And from there, I ended up buying some nightclubs. So I kind of understood it from there. I got a radio show. So I was sort of working in there and then managing teams of DJs across my own venues and other venues. And now kind of here I am with kind of, a few different areas that I delve into. I'd say the majority of my focus now is the DJing side, as will always be, I think, and the creation of the music. So I do a lot of stuff, weird and wonderful. I guess a little tidbit, something I'm doing at the moment is ASMR. So aware of what ASMR is. So we came up with this concept of recreating iconic songs in the format of ASMR. And we're just about to launch a series with a company. I don't know if I could say their name, but so we're working like a Spotify, I guess, that kind of thing. And we've worked with Tom Jones. We've re-recorded his iconic Pussycat. We've worked with Ava Max, Alicia Keys, James Blunt, Youngblood. So, I kind of like anywhere where I can push the envelope and understand the kind of experience of sound, what that does to people, fascinates me.
I mean, it's such a mix of things that you're involved in. What, if you could pick a favourite, what has been a couple of your favourite projects to work on and why, I guess?
So I would say without a doubt, in terms of the DJing, I think venue-wise, there was a venue called The Cross that used to be in King's Cross. It was under the Arches. Yeah. And I used to love working with them because there was something, I did really big events, like 8,000-10,000 people. And of course that always looks great, but there was something amazing about being in a room full of 200 or 300 people that were really tightly packed with nowhere to go. And you were on top of them and they were on top of you. And every little move you made would, I still get goosebumps now. It was such an incredible relationship, a real time relationship between the people and what you were doing. And just those moments where you'd sort of go, I found this record, I believe in this record, I'm going to see what this record does, and realizing that you've got it right. Because there's plenty of times where you get it wrong and you have to adjust and work with that. I'd say that's something I'll never forget. I'd say working with Jason Derulo was always really fun. We accidentally did a project with him and ended up doing maybe 15 records with him. I just loved him, his ethos. I think it's not. It's what's the word? I think people know that there's a lot of egos in the music industry, and it can be quite difficult sometimes. And I was quite pleased with the advent of digital technology, where I didn't have to go to a studio, and I just got sent stuff, because it meant I could just do what I enjoy and not have to deal with some more tricky people. And Jason was always such a great bloke, and was always open to ideas, and everything he did was just perfect, like well written pop, and I really appreciated that. So I'd say that was another one. And then I'd say the only other thing was we did some film and TV stuff, and we ended up doing a show. It's kind of lovely because I was a big fan of the show Gomorrah, which is like an Italian crime drama. I don't know if you've seen it. Great, really gritty. And they approached us to do some work for them. And so, of course, it's like you're a bit of a fanboy. Do you know what I mean? Music. Of course, we did the nightclub scene. Shocker. Do you know? Yeah, so I'd say there've been some good moments that I can talk about. There are some others, but I don't think we can record those.
Amazing. That's awesome. Thank you. And the first thing you mentioned there was kind of ties nicely to the next question. So I want to talk a little bit about specifically the sort of DJing moment of you being in the room and DJing for the crowd. Because obviously you have that immediate like live response that you're seeing how they're responding, whether people are flooding the floor or leaving the floor. And so people call it flow, don't they? That when you're kind of in your flow and you're working, and it kind of feels this kind of out of body kind of experience. How much do you rely on that in the moment when you're doing that kind of DJ work, in terms of the response to the audience in the moment to moment, as opposed to sort of like, I've made this, mix and that's what I'm going to do, whether you like it or not kind of situation?
Yeah. Well, I'm very much in the camp of I'm right in the moment. I believe that, in 30 years of watching dance floors, I can have all the theories I want in a studio and say this track's a great record, or this record I've made is a great record, or whatever, but nothing beats that real-time test. But I think what happens is there are two things that happened for me. Was as I started to drill further down in that experience and go, okay, well, I've played this record and it's reacted really, really well. Well, is it because the record itself is a great record, or is it because of how I brought the record in? The guy, a DJ called Matt Wells, many, many years ago, I was DJing with him, and he said to me, I remember him DJing one day, and he played this record that was really quite flat. And I was like, oh, what's this? And he was like, this is my film record. And I was like, okay, well, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm going to let this record play till the last second that I see the dance floor start to disperse. And I realized that he was intentionally bringing people down, and he'd slowly brought them down to this point where they were about to lose interest. And he was watching really closely, and he'd see one or two go. And just that moment where he was like, okay, now we're ready. And this record must have been 9 minutes long, and he could use it for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, didn't matter. But he would run this record, and then he would come on with something that, by contrast, felt like a lift. But it wasn't, because actually the big record was 3 records away. And so that ability to then move the crowd, because if you're constantly doing this, well, there's no up and down. If there's no up and down, this just feels like this. There's no difference. So you start to understand context of records and context of venues you're in, context of the people on the dance floor. So you start looking, is it predominantly men? Is it predominantly women? But having really drilled into that, I've never pre-prepared a set. I turn up with as much music as I can. I think one of the best stories I can ever think of was I was asked to go and launch a nightclub in New Yorker for a group of guys who were part of the Ministry of Sound camp. And it was all cool, and it was, underground, and Marshall Jefferson and all this stuff. So I turned up ready to do that. And I walked into the venue, and within an hour of standing in this venue, because I loved going to venues beforehand and just watching, seeing what people reacted to, and, being part of the dance floor. And so what happened was, I realized this venue was not going to be a Ministry of Sound cool venue. It was a high street commercial holiday spot. And they were not, just by the people in the venue, they weren't going to pull that off. So I spoke to the guy that owned it whilst the venue was open. I said, listen, this is what is going on here. Can I do what I think I should do? Having never done this before, I got onto their computer. I started downloading commercial, like Now albums. Do you know what I mean? Like just frantically burning them to CDs. And I went back in this venue and played a load of music I'd never played before, because I realized very quickly that that's what was needed. So I've kind of always been willing to adapt. And I think that's the popularity of my bookings, is because the people that book me know they can send me anywhere. And the customer may have we want to be cool and fresh. And, and I go, okay, fine, that's great. We'll do that. And they get there and they all get drunk and go, have you got any Michael Jackson? And I can pivot, very quickly. So I've always been firmly in that camp. I don't know how you walk in and do a pre-recorded set. That being said, if you're doing a massive festival event and you're David Guetta, I totally get it, because you're there for David Guetta hits and you've got to choreograph fireworks and lights, but that's a performance that's totally separate. Other than that, I think you've got to be live. You've got to be live. But to finish on this, what I learned over the years was, as much as there's all these subtleties, you then start to see commonality and threads through everything that goes on in every venue. And once you start to see those, you start to get some bass lines that you can always work from, and that becomes really powerful.
That's brilliant. And we talk about context a huge amount in Style as well. And it's interesting to hear that you saying about the kind of the context of the song, obviously not only in the venue, but like what was gone before and what goes after, how you kind of bookend each song. And like, obviously the way what you hear before a song will influence how you feel about the song. And there's a similar concept that they do in theatre. I know, like towards the end, they'll bring the lights gradually down and down and down so that the final feels more bright, even though because you said you can't just keep going up and you can't keep it flat. So yeah, this idea of kind of playing that context really nice. I wonder if you could give us a sort of, like you were saying about these commonalities and these rules, like what do you think is the sort of like the magic mix that you try and go for? Say you've walked up to somewhere and you need to fix the situation quickly and get some music on and get some working. Not like the music itself, but what is the thing you're looking for, you think, in what you want it to achieve?
So I think, there are, I guess, depending on the venue you're walking into, but if I was walking into what I'd call a high street commercial venue, I think instantly I have I know records that will work wherever you go, whether they're new. I know that, for example, Joel Corry, Head and Heart right now, or Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5, will work. And somewhere in the middle, you've got kind of things like Duffy, and there are certain records that tick certain boxes. And what I'll probably do is, if I was going in having not stood in the venue at all, I would start placing those records and watching to see what got a reaction and start to move towards the kind of what was getting a reaction until I kind of settled the crowd. Because again, it's like, I always remember playing, I can't remember what it was, but it's incredibly cheesy, like horrendously cheesy record in a club. And it went off, like people loved it. And the man, the GM at the time, was like, my God, I never thought that would work. And I was like, yeah, but it was in context to everything else. Then another DJ who'd seen me do that the following came in, obviously wrote down that record and downloaded 20 records that were all just as equally as horrific and played them back to back. And it was awful. It was just like, whoa, what's going on? So I think I start testing the water and be prepared. Like I have no problem that by the first chorus, if I haven't seen a reaction or haven't seen some kind of indicator that I'm on the right track, that record's gone. Right. And that's why I love modern technology, when people hold vinyl and digital and, all that. I love digital because I can literally be switching, and I just keep switching until I see, and then I'll settle and I'll hold for a bit and I'll stay with that. But I will still keep moving, because I still recognize that even if I'm in a venue of 500 people and 400 of them love dance music, there's still 100 that don't. And I still think you have to recognize those 100 and find a way. So I was doing this actually on Friday night, playing remixes of R&B records, because there was a small pocket of girls, they really wanted R&B. I couldn't quite do that because the venue was being dictated quite heavily, but I started dropping in some records that were remixes of R&B records and kind of gave them a little connection. And then I found some R&B records that were at a dance tempo. So there's like Sean Paul and stuff like that. So I'm still maintaining the brief. I, keep them happy for a bit, and then I move back. And the people who obviously prefer the dance, they're willing to hold for 5 or 10, 15 minutes. Most people, they'll keep dancing, they'll do their thing. So it's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you said when we were speaking previously, that you try and aim for sort of 15-minute windows. You don't want any 15-minute window where there's not at least one song that someone's going to love. Like,
that has been my sort of ethos to all my DJs that were, in the agency, and myself, is that I just believe no one should be more than 15 minutes away from a song that they like. I think that's a good, but it's like you've come in, you've bought a drink, you've gone to the toilet, you found your table, you've settled. It's 15 minutes, right? And if you haven't heard something in 15 minutes, it's kind of disappointing and will put you off the venue. and can be enough for you to go, oh, I don't fancy going there next time. Now, it may be of a group of 10 people, one doesn't go, but you can avoid that, right? You can avoid that. And you don't have to compromise your brand. You don't have to compromise the event. But I think it's very possible to keep cycling the music, and funny enough, that's where you get these kind of quick mix DJs who literally will play verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. Now, to me, I'll do that sometimes to create, because you can make it really frenetic. But again, if you do it all night, it just becomes annoying, right? Because you hear a big song and it's gone. You're like, oh, okay. You hear another, it's gone. So I think there is a balance there. But yeah, that's where that kind of came from.
You mentioned reacting to what's happening in the crowd and making observations. Is there an element of planning this kind of gradual increase in energy throughout the evening, almost like an arc, if you think? And have there been times where you've had to wind people down? Has that ever been a request from you?
Yes, but I mean, it's very common. So one of the biggest, one of the biggest tools I think for a GM to have is a DJ that can help them manage the crowd. And so two examples would be, I remember a GM saying to me once, the dance floor's been full for the last hour, no one's at the bar. And I said, okay, no problem. So I played a couple of songs and I pushed them back and people started going to the bar. Because there's no point in having a full, they're like, well, no one's buying a drink. It's free for all, right? So that was something that I learned to work with venue managers about, and move them to the bar, bring them to the dance floor, start to move them around the space. And the other one, which is actually far more kind of, I suppose it is serious, but for a different way, is when guys get really drunk and you get large groups of guys, and you can never tell how a venue's going to develop through the evening. And we've had times where all of a sudden we found it's very heavily male dominated in the venue for one reason or another. And there are certain records I'll start to steer away from. I won't play big rowdy indie songs. There's not going to be any killers. There's not going to, because that's just asking for a mosh pit of drunk men, and it's fun for them to a degree, but it's very exclusive. Yeah. Everyone else feels horribly uncomfortable. Things get broken. So I've literally worked with venues and I've said, listen, I'm not going to be playing any rock for a bit. And they're like, okay, fine. And if that was a venue that was part of the brief, and I'd explain why. And most managers got that. So I think, there is a real opportunity to help and work with, the people that are running the venues. And I always find that really frustrating when I see, we were talking about this the other day, that my least favorite sentence is when a DJ says, I'm going to educate the crowd. It's a horrific sentence that should be like, it should be a signifier to show them the door, because it's like, you're not working with me. Like, I've got a venue to run. I've got drinks to sell. I've got people to keep safe. I've got all sorts of things. And if you're just like mavericking your own game, do you know what I mean? And trying to create your own version of amnesia, you're not, then go and work there. You know what I mean? Like, you need to be making underground music and, living off baked beans in a room somewhere until you're famous, because that's that path. And to turn up at a high street venue and want to do that, I just think is irresponsible, and it's just irresponsible.
I love this idea you're saying, that how in the moment you can be with music, because I think obviously this is the thing for us at Startle, is that it's not just playing background music because it's nice and makes it feel a bit more comfortable. It's like getting people to see that you actually have these levers that you can pull. You want them to be faster or louder or quieter or whatever it is, to kind of, like you say, get them to go to the bar or get them to calm down or to bring them to the floor or to, whatever it is. You have music is your lever to pull in a lot of those cases. And it's really interesting. I'm really kind of glad to hear that you have that similar sort of like moment to moment lever pulling within your work as well, because you're creating the whole atmosphere as much as any other element is, and so you kind of a key part. It's not just play music and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I implemented in my own venues was a 15-minute warm down at the end of the night. So all the DJs were told at 2:45 you start bringing the music down and the volume down. So I want you to land at least half volume by the time you hit 3:00, because there was this constant problem of DJs going to the finish, 3:00, big explosion. You've now got 300 people drunk, full of energy. Do you know what I mean? That now have got nowhere to disperse that energy. And it either gets dispersed in your club, which involves them grabbing lights and pulling them off the ceiling, or cushions going everywhere, whatever, or outside on the public. So I implemented that. And then I implemented it in venues I went to work at. And I remember Roadhouse, which is sadly gone now in Covent Garden. I implemented that there because, like if they were dispersing 800 people onto Covent Garden at 3 a.m, and it was something they were constantly having a problem with, and security guards trying to manage, as drunk children, essentially, because that's what grown adults become when they get really drunk, trying to manage them. And that 15-minute window became really powerful, actually, because actually some people started to leave in that 15-minute, which was perfect because they weren't really buying the drop-off of drink sales, as any venue know, between 2:30 and 3, that last 45 minutes, half hour, is dramatic, so you're not really benefiting by holding them. So the trick was to utilize that. So that was another tool that we and I agree. I mean, now the technology of Startle and it allows you to do that stuff. So why not take advantage of it, right? It's like it's in your arsenal, manage. That's what blew my mind, was how powerful music is with the psychological behavior of people, and studying that stuff. And we can talk about that, or, I know some people find it boring, but the famous one was the Janis Joplin "Dad Won't Buy Me a Mercedes Benz" that went into a Mercedes advert, and the sales went up by 54%. The impact of that song was just, and that shows you, right, how that drives people's behavior to buy a car. It's like, that's a big commitment off a song playing on an advert, so that's what you can use, right? So why not? And I'm always fascinated to learn more. Like, there are people out there, like this guy we're doing with ASMR. It's blowing my mind, some of the stuff he's telling me about the impact of sound and real subtle stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but and I think, you definitely can't bore us with it, because, it's one of our 3 pillars. So we have music, plus we have technology, and we have behavioral science, because, without the behavioral science bit, it's all just sort of guessing and wishful thinking. So yeah, we're completely on the same hymn sheet, so to speak. So just taking a pivot a little with the topic. So we're going to talk a little bit about context. So we spoke about the context as in like what track goes before and what goes after, but in terms of the actual sort of physical context, in terms of what the site's like, and the impact that has, because, again, it's something we know has a strong impact on the people. There's probably one of the most famous context sort of driven experiments is the Stanford Prison Experiment, which most people kind of tend to have heard of because it was so dramatic. But essentially, they turned the ground floor, a sort of basement in Stanford University, into a prison, and they randomly assigned students as prisoners or as guards. And it was horrific and had to be shut down because what happened was so depraved and awful. And the thing was that the power of the context radically transformed the way that people were responding to the situation. So kind of swinging on that, like, how much do you think about the context of where you're actually playing, in terms of, is it open air? Is it big? Is it small? Is there lights? It's interesting that counterplay with music, because as we implement music in businesses, the context, if they're in a train station, is going to be very different to, if they're in a nice restaurant, kind of by themselves, or if they're, as a part of a theatre, or whatever it might be. I'm interested in what kind of power that you having in context when you're playing music.
I do think it's everything to understand what you're trying to achieve in a space. Because walking in somewhere and thinking, my job is to, I'm going to make them all jump up and down and dance. There's a real basic kind of thought. It's like, is that my job today? Like, is that what I'm trying to do? And, what is, like, where am I? I think it's really important. Am I in Scotland? Am I in London? Am I in the suburbs? Am I in, the inner city, urban spaces? Am I in a cocktail bar, a nightclub? All those factors will have a huge impact on the decision making. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I often see is volume. I think that people have this psychology that turn it up. And I don't know what I don't know what that's about, because I always remember a venue where it was a venue that we owned, and it was a sort of a bar until about 9 o'clock, and then the DJ would start. And I had this manager who would go, as 9 o'clock the DJ started, he would just go like that, and the volume would go from a nice background to just, and I would sit and watch people go, should we go? And like broken that experience, and you'd lose, and you go, oh, don't worry, because people will come. I'm like, yeah, but we just lost 30 people that could have stayed the rest of the night. Like, why did we kind of, so like knowing that actually the job is to sit back as the DJ. So to start and to match what's playing off the background system and to stay with that for a bit, 20 minutes, half an hour, and look at what's going on and matching. I would always have this rule that I just want to hear people talking. Like my volumes are good if I could just hear them talking in a kind of more laid back venue and then work from there. And I think, context is constantly evolving as well, depending on how the night's gone. Like I said, it was a very male driven night or a female driven night, or who's come into the venue, and understanding that. And like, I was always really known in a lot of the venues I worked in for going around and talking to people. Like I'd put a record on, I'd go up to a group of people, particularly if they were sitting down or kind of, they seemed to be very sullen. I would go over and see what was going on and kind of just say hi, have a laugh with them. But in the middle of that, try and put some context, on what they were there for and what they were trying to achieve. And that would give me a better understanding. And I'd think, okay, well, I've got these 5 pockets of people that I've now spoken to. And I know that some of them it's about music, some of them they're just not drunk enough, whatever, and start to manage that. And I think, it's, it's a common mistake to think that every venue, one package fits all. I think it's, I think venues need to be understood. But as I say, one thing I have learned is there are kind of threads that you can work with, and you can adapt those threads to fit, what you're doing, because most people are out because they want to have fun. And if you start with that, if we're talking about a high street venue, if you start from there and you start programming what you're doing from there to enjoy themselves, they don't want to be too serious. They don't want to be, they just want to have a good time and find that balance. All of a sudden you open up, you sort of tap into the people that are there, and then you can finesse it as you go along. But like I say, I think technology does it incredibly well now.
Mm.
Like, and as we move forward, some of the stuff I'm seeing now is it's fascinating. Mm. Like looking at where people are in a venue, looking at how loud the volume is, looking at, even down to requests is quite fascinating, because requests is a tricky business. I often had a real problem. I had all microphones removed from my venues because it ended up, can you give a shout out to Charlene? It's her 30th, and it'd be like, you just get 20 requests, and it'd be say hello to the Southside Woking Massive, and then the Massive would get upset. And, so it's like, get rid of that. But requests, my experience of requests, and this may be controversial, but the person who makes the most noise about what requests they want is your benchmark for who you should ignore the most. I've always found, I know it's terrible to say, but the person who comes up and goes, you need to play this, you need to play this, you need to play, that for me is a real strong signifier of what I need to avoid. Because in 30 years of DJing, every time I buy into that, okay, I'll play that song for you, kills the atmosphere. And the best part of it is they're usually not even on the dance floor. They've usually gone to the toilet, the bar, or, and you're like, what? And then they come back and go, did you play my song? And you go, yeah, I did. Can you play it again? And you're like, whoa. So, yeah, I think context is everything. And I think you learn that stuff as you go along. And I imagine you guys have got a plethora of data that drives what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, like you say, with integrations, it can get even more exciting with, measuring how dense the crowds are or how loud they are, or that kind of stuff. For those who don't know, so Danny helps us build our Ultimate DJ product, which is a very exciting product, which I love talking about. But Danny, maybe if you want to give us like a 60-second elevator pitch of what Ultimate DJ really is.
Yeah, essentially, I saw off the back end of the whole DJing experience, which was in everywhere, there was a whole range of venues that felt the need to commit to DJs. And actually their budgets didn't allow that, and that what they would end up with was a compromised experience that was forced on them because they felt they needed that. So I worked with a company and we looked to sort of fix that, and we fixed it by we literally created some mixes. And I said, by the time you get the lights right and the smoke, I think we can recreate something that's going to be a compromise between the real problem, which was DJs not turning up, DJs getting drunk, DJs bringing their friends, them getting drunk, telling the manager, do you know who I am? Which is I love that sentence, because I always think if you need to ask, it's already been answered. But, fair enough, ask the question. Equipment getting broken, equipment breaking down, DJs not bringing the right equipment themselves, volume levels. Again, there was a running joke with a venue where they said, we think the DJ's deaf. And I said, why? And they said, because he just keeps turning it up. I think song choices, because it becomes about personal experience. So all of that stuff, we were like, how can we solve that? And so over what is probably now 8 or 9 years, we finessed this system that essentially recreates the experience of the DJ. But what we've done is we have a team that I manage of around, I'd say it's around 100 people, but we probably dip into about 20 of them regularly. And they are high street DJs, nightclub DJs, tour DJs, radio DJs, producers, remixers. So they're all ticking different boxes, and I will constantly be taking information from them. What are you playing? What's working? What's not working? Here's a track. I've played it 3 or 4 times in a club. I think it's doing really well. Do we think it's too early? Radio's supporting it. So we're pulling loads and loads and loads of information, even down to, I played this song, I had a DJ recently say I played this song and it keeps causing fights because it's a very kind of sort of chest out sort of thing. And so we're like, okay, well, we're going to avoid that song, so we're learning. And so we take all that data regularly, all the time. We're constantly feeding it into the system. And we end up with these containers, essentially, of content. Some of it's completely unique because we get it from remixers and producers that we work with. So it's not available anywhere else. Some of it are, stuff that they've made themselves, maybe a mashup of tracks. And then the rest of it is sort of road tested music. And we place it into this system that never misses a mix, it never misses a beat, it never messes with the volume, it never plays filler, it never goes off on its own tangent. And so we it was really interesting because the first place we started to I road tested the system after 5 years of development, was my own club. And the true story, we had 2 floors. It was a Friday night. Usually we didn't open the upstairs because we didn't get busy enough. We're downstairs, DJ's playing. All of a sudden we got an influx of people. The system was in there being used more for just the background music than using the virtual DJ system, but it was there. And we didn't know what to do. And I said, right, move the DJ upstairs because he can go upstairs and get the main room going. And downstairs, we're going to turn it into what at the time we called school disco, which is kind of like ultimate party, right? So I said, look, put the ultimate party on, leave a bouncer by the DJ booth. I'll set the smoke to auto. I'll set the lights to auto. We'll just get through this because we don't want to turn away 200 people. Mm-hmm. So we did that. And in 5 hours, no one noticed and the dance floor was full. And I really hadn't expected that. And people were asking, can I give the DJ a request? And the bouncer was saying, no, unfortunately, there's no DJ. And they're like, well, who's playing the music? And it outperformed my expectations, like in a nightclub. I'd never really thought that I was going to take that on. I was thinking bars and restaurants, casinos maybe, but, and it literally kept the dance floor full all night, played hit after hit after hit, and on point for that kind of what we then called school disco. Mm. Okay, we're on to something. So I started reaching out to companies and we found that we installed it with a casino in London that was having problems with DJs, and they were so glad to resolve the issue of the DJs that they didn't really worry about the music. But we've been speaking over the last year, and they are so passionate about the system now that they want to implement it in every area, and they want a different DJ. So that's kind of what it is. It's like the opportunity of having access to 4 or 5 or 6 different DJs whenever you like. So it doesn't matter if it's a Tuesday evening and you get an influx of people you didn't expect. And you ask them, what are you into? What do you fancy? And and having that freedom, without all the hassle, is proving very powerful. And we're getting a lot of people switching over, particularly. And I think we talked about this briefly the other day. If you're spending £20,000 a year on DJs, and we can replace that at a fraction of the cost and free up the remainder of that money. Well, yes, you could say, great, we're saving money, or you could now have access to budgets for marketing or special events that you just didn't have, and if that's I used to say without compromise, but I actually think what you're getting is far superior to one of these kind of laptop high street DJs because, and I don't like saying this, but I'm a very experienced DJ, as are a lot of my team, and I get paid a lot of money to go and play prestigious events because I don't make a mistake. So you're now getting access to that and all the other people. And I could list, we've got people working at Kiss FM, Radio 1, playing at BCM in New York. I mean, these are really skilled people that are getting, big money for what they do. And so that all of that information is being consolidated into essentially this little box. And I think that is just really powerful,
Yeah, amazing. It's really interesting, actually. I mean, we often get very positive feedback about Ultimate DJ, and by far the most common thing that people say is that everyone loves the music and that people really thought there was a DJ there. That is the most common thing, is that the people really thought there was a DJ in the room. Well, and it's obviously not true.
Very quickly, so I worked with a very high-end casino brand, and they wanted the DJs, but the aesthetic was 90% of their requirement. And the problem with aesthetic-driven DJs is they can't DJ. And let alone they can't, they always play the same thing, deep house. I don't know what it is about deep house, but it seems to be the go-to. So we actually, and I can't say where it is, but we actually put our system in, and our system plays, and they just have good-looking girls and guys who stand there and pretend. So when you walk in, you see this really aesthetically pleasing human being dressed cool with the headphones doing the thing, but it's our system that's delivering the content. And actually, that's kind of what you're saying. You know what I mean? It's, we're solving another problem, one that I hadn't expected to solve, but, we fixed that for them with the system.
Mm-hmm. And for as much as, we've been talking a lot about kind of responding and being in the moment, obviously it's still very much working for the audiences because they're saying, it feels like a DJ's here. How do you feel like Ultimate DJ actually gets that, where it feels like it's a live, in the moment kind of response, even though it isn't?
I think so much of it is about the data that we collect from DJs. And I think a great example is, so there was a thing I used to do where I would play quite a modern R&B song, and then I'd go into Fat Man Scoop, Put Your Hands Up, which is a real crowd pleaser. And then from there, I would cut into an old Jackson 5 song out of nowhere, which would just take the roof off because it was so unexpected. But I knew that you really only wanted the verse and chorus of that song, because it was one of those songs that you sing along to and you love it. But by the time you get to the third chorus, it's a bit, this record's from 1974, it's a bit tired. So I'd be out by the chorus and I'd be into another record, and then that record followed. And so I learned that the context of that record was about playing a bit. And all of the system, there is data points that tell the system that. So they tell the system, this record, when it's played, you're only playing a verse and chorus of it. And it only gets played in the context of what's gone before and after. And so that's like the experience of a live dance floor being dropped into the system. And all right, it's never going to be as reactive as a highly skilled DJ, but it's getting close enough that, like you say, people are really enjoying that experience. And those moments that have been captured by all the team now end up in the system. And those moments work because those DJs did them 20 or 30 times because they were such great moments, they repeated them. And now we're just kind of moving them forward. And I think also because everything is tried and tested, there's no filler. I think because you don't get those volume drops. I think gaps between music, is that silence is a killer. Mm-hmm. I know when the power's gone down, or, even if it's 6 seconds, it's like a lifetime. So I think, and I just think that everything is very, very well thought out from start to finish. Mm-hmm. And finally, technology allows us to do what we want to do. We couldn't do this 10 years ago. We probably couldn't have even done it 5 years ago. We would have struggled. Processing power. I think it's fascinating that a box this big, can do what we need to do.
Well, this is the thing as well. It's literally like, this sort of size, and it's replacing all of that. And then obviously with integrations for lights and smoke and sound, you are getting that, because the lights and sound and smoke or whatever are responding to the music. So it does feel very much like a live thing. Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Not to go back to the start of our discussion, but you mentioned kind of dropping in unusual tracks or tracks that maybe aren't popular or bubbling under. I'm not sure the correct terminology you would use. What is it about those tracks that make you want to choose them? Is there things that you're looking for? How do you feel in that moment as well when you're about to drop something that you're unsure of? Because there's crowd pleasers and there's popular tracks, and I guess you must have a kind of selection of ones that you know will work in any given situation. But how do you drop in the new stuff?
So it's really interesting. Like, in terms of when I sort of will go off piste, I will always track a record initially. Nowadays, I mean, the data you've got from streaming and radio is really important. So is it being supported by radio? Has it seen specialist support? Have I seen it anywhere else? Do I believe in the record? Like, have I listened to it? This is a real, this is great. But we could all be wrong, right? It could be a big marketing thing, and we've all been played it just enough times just to think we're listening to a good record. Mm-hmm. So I think what I tend to do is I have actually a folder called new tracks, new dance and new pop and new R&B. And when I've got the crowd in a comfortable place where they're really enjoying themselves, I think that's always an opportunity to see what a new record will do, because you've got enough room, because these days attention span is so short, but you've definitely got 2 minutes where you can drop a new track and you can watch that dance floor, and you'll see one of 3 things. You'll see big reaction, which means they have caught up with it and it's in play, and they'll dance to it or sing to it. And, they stay with it and they seem enthusiastic, which is a great response. People always underrate that. But if they all stay on the dance floor, it's great. And option 3 is you see there's pockets of people who don't really know it and they're a bit confused by it. Some people are, I know, and you watch people talk to each other because they will. They've got some on my phone. Look, I had this 6 months ago. So all those conversations start happening, and I'm watching that, and that will become an indicator of what happens. But I've had it where I played a track and it's just not had any, and I can see people just go, oof, the shoulders go down, and they're like looking at me like, what have you just done? And I know that record's got to go. Now, that record will then go into another folder, and I'll revisit it in a few months' time. And actually, I've had records that's happened to me, so I've avoided them, and they've since become big. Mm. And then it's really difficult for me, actually, because revisiting them, it's a bit nerve-wracking, because you think, last time I tried this record, it was awful. But the data I'm being given is, no, it's working now, and you play it, and you go, oh, great, okay, it's working. And then that goes in the folder. So I think that's how new music gets introduced. I'm never there to educate. I'm always just testing if they've crossed a certain line, but particularly with the majority of my work, which is high street work. If I'm playing in a ministry type venue, it's a totally different thing. And I'm expected to play stuff people have never heard of. That's kind of part of, even though I will tease stuff in. And then I think the other thing is like dropping in something really, really random, and I was trying to think of an example, but, I'd say like the Friends theme tune, or I've done some really odd stuff in the middle of sets purely because I've reached a point where I've got people so on side. They're singing to every chorus. I'm cutting the volume. They're singing with me. It doesn't matter what I do. And it's almost kind of my own childish sense of humor to see if I could take them that bit further. Can I get everyone? And not so much now, but there was a moment where things like ABBA or I don't know, what's his name? Never Gonna Give You, Rick Astley, right? And then I remember people doing that meme where you got rickrolled. And so I decided I want to rickroll the whole club. And I know that most of them will know what rickrolling is, and it's now about how I do that. And yeah, I'll do it, but I'll only do it for 15 seconds. Mm-hmm. And I will know exactly, and I will have figured out in my head how I'm getting out of it. So I'll know the next track, its timing, I can loop out of and turn it into kind of almost, because what's quite nice is if you've got that playing, Never Gonna Give You Up, you loop that and you start playing a dance, you just dum, 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 never gonna give you, and all of a sudden it's a remix and you've kind of got yourself out, and then, you put in a cappella, put your hands up for Detroit, and it's gone. Mm-hmm. But you've created that really odd moment where people are like, do you remember that you did that, didn't you? And they now do that in big festivals. I've seen it many times where they drop something, and
I've seen it, ABBA being dropped, or like a Madonna Holiday, I think was dropped before. But it's such a powerful tool. It's that unexpected moment that creates almost like an entry in people's minds, and then it's something that they will later recall.
Juxtaposition is everything, right? 2 big tunes next to each other is just 2 records. But if you can be playing a really modern record and suddenly switch into something from the 70s and it works, that's like, because it is that unexpected. You're throwing people off. They didn't see it coming at all. And I think that's always been something I love doing. How can I create those moments?
Yeah.
Because once you get people to that point, you do anything. That's when you can start playing new music, old music, doesn't matter. They're in it for the rest of the night then. And it doesn't always happen. Of course it doesn't. Sometimes you just got to work hard. But when that happens, that's what we were talking about at the beginning. You're just connecting in the moment and you're just there in that experience. I could be on the dance floor or I could be doing what I'm doing. And often I've been known to run onto the dance floor, dance through the dance floor. But I feel like I'm missing out. You know what I mean? I want to go. You know what I mean? This is fun.
Well, you do need to show that you're a supporter of your own product, I guess. The dancing, yeah. So James and I are going to be DJs for the night. What if you could condense it to 3 tips to put a successful night? What would those be?
So, 3 tips just for a successful night. I'd say the first one is get there early and understand your venue. So whether that's talking to managers, staff, watching customers, like, look, who are they? Are they old? Are they young? What are they doing? So learn the space. That's the first thing. I would say the second thing is don't be afraid to realize you got it wrong. Don't hold on. I played this song and I'm sticking with it. It's if it's not working, get rid of it. And that's, really important. And I'd say the third thing is, doesn't matter what you do, but I just believe in my soul that music is about integrity, right? When you write a song, you're capturing integrity. And when you DJ, you're capturing your integrity. Be in your integrity with what you're doing. Enjoy what you're doing. Find a way of navigating, whether it's rock or pop or, dance or techno or whatever. Find your space in that. Because there's no point in just painting by numbers, because that you'll get away with it, but it won't translate. You are the architect of fun. And if you're not having fun and enjoying that, it's just hard work for everybody.
I feel those are really good life lessons, actually. But don't worry, we're not taken to the deck soon. James and I have very little experience. No, those are really good tips. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. Well, I mean, that's been brilliant. We've covered off a lot of stuff there. It's been really interesting, great talking to you. More broadly than just Ultimate DJ, as there's so many interesting things. I think we could probably gone on a lot of tangents there. But yeah, it's incredible. So thanks again for sharing your time with us and for talking through some of these things. If you have enjoyed watching it, this has been the Change the Music, Change the Experience webinar series. We will be interviewing other experts from different industries, so please have a look for those as they come up in the future. Danny and of course James, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.